Everyone knows that when you first see a property, when you first arrive, the first impressions are all important. When we bought this house here, it was actually divided up into 4 different units, and it was all just a mass of concrete. We had telegraph poles, we had old shacks, and there were 4 different properties using the space, of which we didn't own them all. So it was quite a job to work out what to do. It was also full of cars because everybody just came and dumped their cars on the concrete, which doesn't make for a great first impression. So we tackled it by dividing up the spaces. So first of all, to make a semi-private space for the main house, I put in a yew hedge punctuated with stone piers. I wanted the whole yard to read as one, but at the same time I wanted a bit of privacy behind that side of it. Then with the little dovecot cottage behind me, it has a very ugly extension, which is nicely hidden by the huge clipped evergreen oak trees. We've got 4 of them in the centre now. And so what I did with that is we put a trellis screen across the front to hide the extension, and then we put in bleached hornbeam hedge, which are growing above it to fill. So you see the old bit of the building, which I really love, but you don't see the modern extension. And at the same time, when we put the trellis screen in, of course, you have a lovely little space behind it for a private sitting area for that house. But then to give it a bit more sun, we put a little tree seat around the laurel that is by it, which actually needs cutting back a bit. It's got too big, really. Then we've got the big barns, and then we've got the offices here. And the offices need a bit of privacy, so I've just made a border in front of them. So that really delineates the space. We've got the main arrival bit where you come in, turn round, park or whatever. You've got the private garden to my right, you've got the bit by the cottage, and then you've got the bits around by the barn with a sitting area in the middle. And that big space was grass, and then recently we've changed it. The evergreen oaks are really nice. They add a lot of winter structure. We've clipped them into sort of cotton reels on stalks, and they really, I think, are the sort of the highlight of the courtyard to me. And I've put the little metal tree seat in the middle with a lovely big bird in it. And that forms, I think, a nice centrepiece to the yard. I have kept the grass in front of the hedge. It's debatable whether we should remove it. It is a lot to mow, really. It's a tiny little space to mow, but it's something you have to do every week in the summer. But I quite like the greenness of it because I think it just adds a soft quality to the yard. And there is a lot of stonework here. So one thing is car parking, and really with many entrance areas I try to keep the cars away from the house in a way if possible. I always think that people will sort of park in the hallway if they could, or right outside the front door. They always want to get very close to the house. But actually, if you can just move them away a bit and flag up where visitors should park in some way, usually they just follow the owner's cars and they park next to those. But if you can park them away from the view of the house, I think it does do a lot to help the building, because even if you've got a really flash car, I would rather not see it right in front of a beautiful house. But that's me. And so here what we do is we put them in garages. We've got 2 converted stone buildings which you just drive in and out of, so you don't have to worry with garage doors and things like that. But generally people who come here will park outside the yard, and then visitors can come and park inside. And it's a simple sort of thing, and it just means that we don't get this area covered with vehicles, which I much prefer. I much prefer looking at plants than cars. So then we've got the planting. Come and have a look at the planting that we've chosen. So for the planting, because it's an agricultural yard, I've kept a very simple plants. I've got a lot of birds. I love topiary birds, and I've slowly built up my collection. So I've got just a mass of birds surrounded by a low box hedge, and I've repeated the same in front of the offices just to keep people away from the windows a little bit. And they're really simple, they're agricultural, and I think they're fun. I've got a lot of trained fruit trees on the walls. We've got apples and pears running all the way around the tall walls. And then we've got a cork oak, which is just starting to show something in the raised plant bed there. And then we've got, instead of having all the birds at one level, I've jacked some up. So we've got some in baseless pots there. The one in the middle of the seat is in a baseless pot. The one over there with the little bird on top is in a baseless pot. And that way we've got a variety of heights of the bird, which I think makes them more obvious. I've also added these pittosporum multi-stems recently, just by each gate into the courtyard. And they've got this lovely evergreen foliage and then beautiful scented flowers in the summer. And I think they're really nice. Interestingly enough, in nurseries where they grow them down in Bedfordshire, they've got a lot of them in stock over winter. And this winter, they had temperatures of something like -8, -9, and they totally defoliated. But they didn't here, and we are far further north than them, but obviously it's just a sheltered microclimate, I think, within the yard. Then this border along the front of the hedge, we've sort of put different things in there. When we've had weddings and things, we would add a mass of dahlias just to add a bit of colour for fun. Last year I did pictorial meadows down there. Other years I've had cosmos and things like that. I'm not sure what I'm going to grow this year, but I do like to have areas I just change things around and try out different recipes and different ideas, and that's definitely one of those. It does look quite nice just with no plants, with the grass running right up the hedge, I think. And then I've got some big roses running around. I've got the Banksian rose up against that wall, which we cut back heavily each year, and that has wonderful scented flowers in early summer, in spring, and you can smell it right across the yard. It's really good. The topiary around the area in the middle is just simple geometric shapes of box in balls and in squares. The planting in the rectangle was grass, but now we've changed it. I've just got rows of lavender in the beds, and they are going to be kept as distinct lavender shapes, maybe lavender balls. And then we've got lots and lots of alliums in between, and that's because it looks a bit like a crop when you plant the single plant in rows. I think it looks really nice, and I think that looks quite appropriate to a farmyard. Could be a lavender farm perhaps, and it's very easy to maintain like that. You've just got 1 or 2 different plants in there, lavenders and alliums, and so it's really easy to maintain. Then I have used other things around there. So for materials in the yard, I've mainly kept to gravel, the granite set edging, and granite set edging I think looks fantastic in farmyards because it's very much a farmyardy type material. I've got the staddle stones in the rectangle, and we had the bases, but the tops had been stolen for the person who had them before, my mum, and so I got little balls to sit on the top, and I think they're quite fun like that. So we've got stone, granite sets, gravel, acid etched metal in the seats and some of the plant tubs, and a bit of terracotta, but generally we keep the materials really simple, really cohesive, and not bring too many different things in. And the same with the colour. So this was all bright white when we came, but bright white wasn't a paint that was around until the later part of the 20th century. The early part of the 20th century, and so it didn't look appropriate, and it makes the white really stand out, the windows really stand out. So we've now gone for this sort of grey blue colour, which I really like, makes it feel quite French to me. So that's the materials, that's the spaces, that's my front entrance. It's a space we see every day, we use every day. So we've kept it quite structural, lots of evergreens, quite simple, can take lots of cars, and it can take all the different residents with everybody having their own space. And the thing that we did fairly recently is just put the little gates to the courtyard on at either side. And it's funny, as soon as we put the gates on, you felt more secure within the courtyard than when the gates weren't there. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but I always find that if you've got a sort of set gate or a set entranceway with some sort of barrier, even if the gate's open all the time, it does make you feel more secure. And obviously when deliveries and things come to you always hear them come anyway, so you know someone's there, but then that just makes the space more private.